For 25 years, I defended doctors and nurses and hospitals in medical malpractice cases. And today I am going to teach you 8 ways for you to become a much better advocate for yourself, especially within the healthcare system. So, my name is Heather Hansen, and I defended doctors and hospitals for decades as a trial attorney. Now I teach people how to advocate for themselves in all sorts of settings at work or in front of their teams or for investments. But this is probably the most important thing, knowing how to advocate for yourself when it comes to your healthcare, whether it's at the doctor's office or in a hospital. So, today I want to share with you 8 very specific tips that are going to help you to be a much better advocate for yourself when it comes to your healthcare. The first thing that you have to know, and this is so important, is that the relationship between you and your healthcare team is a team relationship. There is research that shows, this is research from Mass General, so it's very strong research that shows that the relationship between a doctor and a patient, when it is good, is more beneficial than a daily aspirin a day for someone who is at risk of a heart attack. It is good for weight loss. It is good for blood pressure. It is good for blood sugar. It is good for pain. It is good for lipids or cholesterol. This is research backed. And yet, in my opinion, there's not enough focus on this, the importance of this relationship. So, if this relationship is that important and the ability to be a strong team is that important, it is really important that we think about what makes a good team. Some of these 8 tips really get into the meat of that. But I want you to start with that premise. My relationship with my doctors and nurses and healthcare providers is of the utmost importance for my health. I could go off on the research on that, but I'm going to move on to the 8 tips. The first tip follows up on that. And this is one that some of my doctor friends might not love, but I truly believe that it is a better relationship when we don't call doctors doctor. Okay. For those of you that are doctors or healthcare providers, you might be shaking your heads. Let me give you some reasons. I was just talking to my significant other. He used to be a boss at a big company, and the people that he worked with, who he led, didn't call him Mr. X. They called him by his first name because they were on a team together with mutual respect. It was not a patriarchal relationship. It was a relationship of equals. I have my JD. I'm a lawyer, Juris Doctorate. That makes me, I guess, theoretically a doctor, but I don't expect people to go around calling me doctor. This is an old school thing that does not serve our new school team. And one of the reasons that I got to thinking about this is because of some research about female doctors. The research shows that female doctors get better results. Their patients are healthier than male doctors. And in the research, they think that it's because females are more likely to follow clinical guidelines, which may be part of it. But there's separate research that shows that patients are more likely to call female doctors by their first name. And I think that contributes to a better relationship. I think, especially for younger people, my parents, they came from a generation where the doctor was the boss and they wanted to be able to look to a doctor for the solutions. And that may have worked for them. But for those of us who now have ChatGPT and Google and each other and other patients and Reddit and all the places where we get information, we are equals in different ways. They have an education we don't have, absolutely, but we know our bodies in ways that they don't. So I always ask my doctor, if they don't introduce themselves by their first name, I ask them, are you comfortable with me calling you Susan? And I've never had a doctor say no. And if they do say no, that might not be the doctor for me. So that's the first one. Now, the second one comes along with this. And again, my doctor friends, and I love my doctor friends, they may not love this one either. And this is a little bit nuanced, but don't be afraid to interrupt your doctors. The reason I say this is that same study of female doctors that show that they are more likely to be called by their first names. They're also more likely to be interrupted. There's a lot of research about how often doctors interrupt patients. It's often and it's soon. And that's understandable. Doctors are under a huge amount of stress. They're under a huge amount of pressure to keep visits short, and they have insurance, and they have to see so many patients a day. And we want to be able to get in with our doctors, so we don't want to be talking forever. So you want to be discerning with when you interrupt your doctor. But if your doctor is saying something that you don't understand, interrupt them and make sure that you understand. If they're saying something that's wrong, I've gone to the doctor with my parents and they have said something like, oh, when you fell during PT, she didn't fall during PT. That's wrong. And we're going to interrupt the doctor to let them know that there's some sort of mistake or miscommunication in the record. So the first two are probably getting all the doctors who are listening very angry and turning this off, but it's okay because you're going to like the third one. First one, go over them again. First one is see if you are comfortable not calling them doctor, but calling them by their first name so that you can be true equal team members. Number two, don't be afraid to interrupt if things are wrong or they're missing something or they are there's something you don't understand. And number three, doctors will love. If you've stuck around this long, you're going to be a fan of this one. Be kind to your doctor. Give them positive reinforcement and yes, love. So I had a podcast, The Elegant Warrior. It's still out there. I just haven't done any new episodes of late. And on that podcast, I had a doctor who wrote Dr. Stephen Treziak wrote a book called Compassionomics. And in that book, he talked about the power of compassion in medicine. But it was all about patient providers, doctors, nurses, giving compassion to their patients. Nothing about patients giving compassion to their doctors, even though doctors experience burnout, doctors experience enormous stress, doctors experience pressures from insurance companies, doctors experience pressures from administrators. Doctors are humans. And we don't study enough the power of giving doctors compassion. But there is one study that speaks to this. In this study, they took a group of doctors and split them into three. The first group read neutral medical information before they saw a patient. The second group, they didn't do anything with. And the third group, the researchers gave them a lollipop before the interaction with the patient. So let's go over that again. Neutral medical information, one group, nothing, the second group, lollipop, third group. Doctors not allowed to eat the lollipop, which is very important. Then, and I want to make sure I get it right, the group that was given the lollipop were 2 times as speedy at getting at the right diagnosis, 2 times as fast at reaching the diagnosis correctly. Now, the reason they didn't let them eat the lollipop is they didn't want it to be because of a blood sugar boost. But this is purely something to do with the doctor's psychology, the doctor's brain. Is it happiness? When I first read about this study, it was in The Happiness Advantage by Sean Aker. And the idea that maybe it's happiness, but I think it's reward. I think it's appreciation. I think it's knowing that the doctors are humans too. And so I'm not saying bring your doctor's candy, although maybe bringing your doctor something, some sort of reward, encouraging the doctor, complimenting the doctor, thanking the doctor, treating the doctor, the nurse midwife, the PA, the NP, the tech as a human is going to make that relationship better and will therefore make the team better. That is so important, especially if you're going to be calling them by their first name and interrupting them. You best also show them some compassion, some empathy, some respect. So super important. Number 4. Now here's where the onus starts to get on you. You are a team member. You have got to do things like track your symptoms. There are fabulous apps that are symptom trackers out there, especially my women who may be in the throes of perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, hormones. You want to track your symptoms to know what time of month are you experiencing this moodiness, this itchy skin, this joint pain, this shoulder pain, this hip pain, this and same thing with anyone, right? When are you experiencing the stomach pain? When are you having the stomach cramps? When are you experiencing joint pain? Really keeping track of that is going to give your doctor more information they can't get anywhere else, which is why you are such an important member of the healthcare team. It's important with respect to eating well and drinking water, yes, but it's also important because you know your body better than anyone else. I was having pain in this finger, and it was going on for a really long time. And I kept going to the doctor, and they said, well, you might have some arthritis or whatever. And then I recognized, I don't have my phone in here. I was resting my phone in this joint, and it was actually, it's much straighter now. It was actually starting to get like a little bend to it. My phone was heavy at the time. It had one of those thick battery cases on it. And when I stopped doing that, the pain got better. No doctor's going to know that. You might get lucky and get a doctor who says, I used to hold my phone this way. Do you do that too? But if you track your symptoms, you might see some connections that your healthcare providers don't. So that's number 4. Track your symptoms, know your body, and share that knowledge. Number 5 is write down your questions before you go to the doctor. When we get to the doctor, there is white coat syndrome, which people get nervous, people get anxious, people get sometimes that patriarchal relationship, afraid to say things. But if you've written down your questions, you will remember to ask them. I also think in order to have empathy and perspective taking with our doctors, to send them ahead of time may be helpful. Doctors may have a moment before coming into your office to review your questions. If there's a lot of them, they may know to set more time aside for your visit or to respond to some of those questions via email later on at night. So I like to email or in the portal send my doctors questions that I have, so that when we get to the visit, we can really focus on the things that I'm concerned about. Whether you do that in person, ahead of time, make sure that you have your questions written down and make sure that you insist on getting the answers. Doctors are in a rush. They might not be able to do it during the visit. I know that the doctor friends that I have and the people I've represented for 25 years who are wonderful, caring, amazing doctors would often say patients come in with pages of questions. I don't have time for that. Well, then the doctor is going to have to focus on 3 and then maybe come back to you another time or have you talk to the nurse. There's a million things that can happen, but you have to have the questions written down so that you remember your questions. The next thing about this that I think is really interesting is I heard Bill Gates the other day on the Smartless podcast, which is one of my favorites. And he was talking about the uses for AI right now. And one of them was in healthcare. And he talked about taking your, say it's an x-ray report or an MRI report or a doctor's office note and putting it into ChatGPT or whatever you use for your AI and saying, tell me what this means as if I'm in 6th grade. And now you have a better understanding and you make a much better team member. This is also really helpful with respect to those bills. You get those bills from the doctors and you're like, what are they billing me for? What am I actually paying? And if you put that into ChatGPT or some alternative into AI, it will give you a better understanding of your medical bills and what's going on. It makes you a more informed patient. It makes you have better questions. It makes you more focused. It makes you know whether you need a second opinion or a specialist. It can be very, very powerful. That is number 6. Number 7 is another one that my doctors may not love, but I do think it is worthwhile to ask, and that is to ask if you can record the visit. Now, some doctors have no trouble with this because the truth is some doctors are recording the visit as well to automatically turn it into a note. And that I think is going to be one of the things that's the future of medicine. But some doctors may not like the idea of being recorded or may think that you are litigious. And the thing that's hard for doctors is they're doing their best and they are sued a lot. And a lot of those suits don't have a lot of merit. And so they can be defensive. I represented an amazing, amazing doctor who did everything right, but she was sued. And after our lawsuit, she stopped practicing medicine. And I spoke with her at length about it because I really felt like it was a loss to us patients that we lost this wonderful doctor. But she said that she could not stand to see every patient as a potential lawsuit. And so when you ask to record them, that might be their response. They may think, oh gosh, this patient wants to sue me. So just explain that you want to play it for your family members. You want to listen when you're not as nervous. You want to go back and reference it. You want to put it into ChatGPT to understand it more. There really shouldn't be a huge objection to that. And if there is, you need to dive in a little deeper as to why and what that means for you and you're being part of the healthcare team. And the last one, number 8, is to bring an advocate with you to your visits. Bring in another teammate. And the reason I think this is so important is, and even the teammate isn't always going to be the greatest, but when we are in there, if we're the sick person or we're not feeling well, we're scared, we're anxious, we're frustrated, we're confused. And so we might forget to ask those questions or ask to record or interrupt when something's wrong. But if you have an advocate with you, they may remember when you don't. They may remember things when you leave that you don't remember. And it's just good for you to have someone there with you to alleviate some of the stressors of just going to the doctor. I love physicians. I love nurses. I had the opportunity to switch sides in my career and I couldn't do it because I really feel so strongly that doctors and nurses are going in every day doing the best they can with bodies that are not perfect. We're all different. We're not robots. It's not like you open up the body and everything looks exactly the same in everyone. And so I feel as though doctors are doing their very best, and we have to be active teammates. We have to give them encouragement and empathy and compassion. And we have to be willing to take on some of the responsibility of interrupting and asking questions and all of those things. I am happy to answer any questions you have about any of this or advocating for yourself in general, which is really what I focus on now. You can ask the questions in the comments below and I'll answer them in another video. But in the meantime, be an active team member in your healthcare. Take good care of yourself and each other. And I will see you soon.